DeCenzo here from Growth Strategy Partners. We're going to get started here in a minute. And just before that, through some administrative points. One is we will be sending out a copy of the presentation at the end of today, so you're going to have a copy of that. It is being recorded. If there's people that you'd like to send this to or others in the company you'd like to have them hear it, that'll be up on our website probably next week. If you have questions today that you'd like to ask us, at the bottom of that window that should be in your screen, there's a little plus sign. If you click on that, you should be able to send us a question that we'll answer more likely at the end of today. And then the other thing is just with that window, if you'd like to close that window and make it smaller, there's an arrow in the top left-hand corner of that that looks red. It looks a little arrow pointing to the right. If you click on that, that'll minimize that window. You can open it up later if you want to ask some questions. So with that, let's talk a little here about the 3 techniques to outperforming your competition. Now, I'll start with a little story. I was talking to someone a week or so ago. I was asking them how 2011 went business-wise for them. And they said, oh, it went very well. They grew 12% last year. And I responded saying, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And they were a little surprised by that because they said, geez, 12%, I thought I did pretty well. I said, well, I know which industry that they were in, and the industry itself grew 18%. So relatively speaking, they did not grow very well, and they'd actually grown less than the industry. And so, one of the points we're going to talk about today, and why we're going to talk about outperforming your competition, is that growth is relative. Growth is relative to what's going on in your industry, what's going on in your segment, and with the economy. Now, and the whole point here is, regardless of what the industry is doing, you've got to outperform them. Because if not, you're actually not growing. You can ride when things are going well, but in order to outperform your competition, do better, you have to be better than they are. Here's some stats that we have relative to the economic growth and our industry growth. Again, how relative is this? The gross domestic product last year grew 1.7%. I'm not sure how many of us would be happy with that. Federal Reserve talks about the 2012 gross domestic product forecast, 2.5%, 2.9%. GOA, 2.5%. There's not a lot of growth that's being planned industry-wise. You see some of the industries that are growing fast, voice over IP, wind power. Actually, today we've got some companies from many different industries. I'm not sure if there's some here today. We've got some engineering businesses, some manufacturing, got some firearms, which is actually one of the industries that's actually growing quite well. And construction, we've got the SBA on here, some transportation. So we've got a good number of different industries here. Some of them are past clients of ours, and some of them are new, which is great to have you here. The whole point here is how relevant is this, in the growth of your industry, the growth of your segment, to the growth of your business? It's relative to the point that it may carry you or it may not carry you, but if you want to outperform your competition, you need to do better than they are, because otherwise they're going to take your customers and they're going to take your profits. So what we talk about is here's 3 examples, 3 potential growth industries. You got growth A, growth B a little higher, growth C even higher than that. I think if I asked you which one you'd like to be in, you might say C because it's growing. Now, the counter-argument of that is that if it's growing, it might be so difficult to actually maintain the existing growth, you wouldn't be able to steal other competitors or steal their customers. Personally, I think the A or B, although it's not growing as fast, might be something that you could do better in because you could actually outperform them. So the whole point we're trying to get to today is about growing your business and outperforming your competition. I've got a little theme here to the extent that it's Easter coming up. What you need to do is outperform your competition. We're going to show you some examples, some techniques on how to do it. Back to the tortoise and the hare, right? Let's see if we can be that hare and outperform the competition. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, let me give you a little introduction to who's going to be here with us. It's going to be myself, Nancy, and Joe. I am Chris DeCenzo. I am the managing partner of Growth Strategy Partners, the founder. I've been working for about 25 years in many different industries. Everything, from manufacturing to distribution, to healthcare, to medical device, and even services. My focus today is going to be a lot on the strategy, on growth strategies and operational excellence and revenue generation. And then I'm going to pass it to Nancy. Nancy, give a little background.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. Well, as a partner of Growth Strategy Partners, I've been with this company for 8 years now, and I've worked as a consultant to help small to mid-sized businesses grow their top line, their bottom line, and in particular their talent. I have over 30 years experience in growing business, and it's around a very broad array of industries. And I noticed that a number of my clients are on the call today, so hi to everybody. I know you can't say hi back, but I'm really glad that you're joining us, and I think you'll find it really interesting. My focus is on generating more sales, and so I'll be covering that part of today's presentation. Joe?
Thank you, Nancy. I'm Joe Thomas, and for over 30 years I've worked with more than 100 companies which offer products and services ranging from contract manufacturing to advanced technical systems. My areas of focus most recently have been in the area of operational improvement, strategic planning, and new business development. So thank you very much. Chris?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Nancy. Growth Strategy Partners, many of you here but on the line know a little about us. We're what I describe as a research-based consulting firm, helping entrepreneurially managed organizations grow their revenues, profits, and talent faster and more efficiently. Okay, and we say we can do this because we've done a lot of research to identify what drives growth. And I'll show you what that research identified, what we call these 7 keys to growth. The interesting thing that we've learned as we do on this research is, yeah, there's some fundamentals that companies need to focus on to grow, but we found that you can outperform your competition by controlling the destiny yourself. It's not about the competition. It's not about the markets and the industry. It's about controllable factors that you have within your business that you can control, driven by the leadership team, that you can use to outperform the competition. Companies that are applying more of these 7 keys are growing faster. And what you'll see here is these 7 keys to growth. I'm not going to go through them all, but we are going to talk about 2 in particular today. One is about the advanced customer management, which gets into revenue generation. The other is robust processes, which is going to talk about profit improvement. And what allows us to help our clients and help them grow faster and more efficiently is that we've done the research to identify what drives growth, these 7 keys. We've built some tools and methodologies. We'll share some of those with you today. And then our consultants, like Nancy and Joe here, been there, done that, past presidents, CEOs, and senior execs. So that's a little about Growth Strategy Partners. Let's talk about today. There's really 3 main points we want to share with you today. If you want to outperform your competition, there's 3 things you need to do. Well, it's probably 3,000 things you do. We're going to focus on 3 today. The first is you may need to change the cultural dynamics in your business. We're going to talk about that. You also will need to improve your revenue-generating systems. Okay, we're not going to talk about going out and just getting a better sales call, but the systems in that whole planning process and execution process of the sales side, and the same thing on the profit enhancement side. Now, I assume most people here have done all the cost cutting that they've been able to do over the next few years, so they've done all the cost cutting. We're going to talk more about efficiency improvements, not about cost cutting. How do you become more efficient as you grow your business? So before we get started and go into each 3 of these, I'm going to start with asking you a question. We actually have a survey question, and the way this works is I'm going to launch this thing that you should be able to see, and what I'm asking you to do is to click on one of them, and the question is, what's your number 1 challenge that you have in outperforming your competition? And I just ask you real quickly to click on one of these boxes. Is it price? Is it that theirs is always lower? Is it the product or service quality? Theirs is always better. What about the sales effectiveness? Okay, there's I think 5 options here, and I'd like you to go check on those and tell me which one is it that you're having a bigger challenge with outperforming your competition. I'm going to take really just 20 seconds or so to do that, and then we're going to jump into the first part here. We've got almost half answering this. This is great. And this is also, I think, good. You can see what other presidents and senior execs are having challenge-wise in terms of outperforming the competition. All right, we've got just about almost everybody voting. I'm going to do another 10, 15 seconds, so if you haven't checked one, please do it quickly. And then I'm going to close this poll, and I'm going to show it to everybody so we all have a visual. And we'll talk a little about this real quickly. All right, I'm going to close this basically right now. I see a couple more votes coming through. So what's your number one challenge to outperforming competition? Let's go see what we got here for an answer. And I'm going to share it. Okay. Nancy, Joe, can you see that?
Sure can. Yeah, and this really speaks to what we're going to be talking about today. That's great.
It's interesting because we've got sales effectiveness and relationships end up being here the top two. Now, this is actually surprising to me because nobody chose price. Okay, now that might mean that we have some more advanced presidents and CEOs, senior execs on the line, that they're not fighting this price war. We hear that a lot. Sales effectiveness, relationship being the top two, and then competitive advantage, which we're actually going to talk about today. Nancy, you want to comment on that?
No, I just think it's really the sweet spot for our presentation today. So I'm really glad to see that those are the challenges people are facing. Maybe that's the reason they signed up. I hope so.
There you go. There you go. All right, let's go talk now about the three pieces today. Let's talk about changing the cultural dynamics. So if you're going to grow and outperform your competition, there's a cultural change, there's a behavioral change that is needed in the organization that is not going to be just, oh, we're just going to do what we can do. I'm on sales calls probably a couple times a week, and we go through and we actually share the research we've done, 7 Keys to Growth, and we ask how people are performing, and I usually get an answer that they're not doing well in at least 2 or 3 of these 7 keys. So the net is they're doing average. When I ask them how well they're performing relative to competition, many of them don't know, but they end up saying, you know what, I'm okay. You know, I'm all set. I know what I need to do. I got some programs in place. You know, I'm all set. Now, what I interpret that to mean is, you know what, I'm okay being average. I'm okay accepting the way I'm doing, or I don't know what I need to do to get better. Interesting, we did a survey a while ago to a group of senior execs. We asked them, do you know what you need to do to grow your business? And we said just kind of put it in 3 categories, meaning do you know what to do, you know how to do it, and you have the skills to make it happen. Or I know what to do but don't know how, I don't have the skills. And the third choice was, well, you know, if really be honest with you, I don't know what I really need to do to grow my business, outperform my competition. And at the beginning of this, the answer was 57% they were sure they knew what they needed to do. 12% on the other side, which I consider the honest group, said, I'm really not sure. And we went through a dialogue about the 7 keys to growth and what it takes to outperform your competition. And at the end of that, we asked the same question. If you want to take a guess at what the answer might be, but I will show it to you, over 60% said, you know what, I guess we really don't know what it takes to outperform my competitors to grow my business. I thought I did, but maybe I don't. So the point here is, what are you going to do? You're spending an hour with us. We think this is great. But what are you going to do to make a change, a cultural change in your business that's going to drive this performance, this outperform your competition culture? Because you know, you've seen the definition of insanity, I'm sure, over and over again. If you do the same thing, expecting different outcomes. So what's going to happen today? What's the conscious change you're going to make in the business to outperform the competition and not take the I'm okay, I'm going to wait and see what's going to happen? So that's really the first thing that you need to think about. I'm not going to go into greater detail on this and preach to you about this, but this is really what's important. We where we find the difference with our successful clients that make a conscious effort. They drive that leadership team to outperform the competition. They set goals and they go after it, versus those that say, I'm okay. I'm going to pass it now over to Nancy. Nancy's going to talk about the sales side. How do we generate more sales? Nancy?
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. Well, this is the number 2 technique that we're going to be talking about today to perform your competition, generating more sales. And we could probably spend an entire hour, maybe an entire day just talking about that. So I had to pick 3 things that I thought were best practices, but were often forgotten by companies that are wishing to grow their top line. Sometimes they don't think about these things, so I wanted to get your attention. The first one is to know your customers, not just who they are, but get to know all you can about them so that you can really get inside their heads. The second one is understanding your competitive advantages. What is it that's really unique about you? What's really strong about your business versus your competitors? You really have to know what your customers value about your competitive advantages. And then lastly, you want to target your best growth opportunities to make sure that you're investing your resources and your time, and that they're really focused on those best chances to get sales. Many companies will kind of just chase the RFPs that come their way, and they don't really understand why they don't get the jobs that these RFPs represent. But sometimes companies will use RFPs as kind of a way to meet the the legal requirements or the company best practices about getting multiple bids, and it's really rigged in favor of their current supplier. So it really isn't a level playing field. So knowing your customer, we want to take a look at the pyramid of understanding different levels of customer understanding. And Chris, if you could, thank you. Let's start at the bottom of the pyramid, because that's the foundation. And most companies will at least have some good understanding of the overall market needs and the trends, the things that are happening that are different and changes that are occurring in their marketplace. I call that level 1 understanding of your market. The next level up, level 2, is understanding the specific market segments, the needs of those segments and the trends. And they're probably different from one segment to another. And that's how you're able to really differentiate your company from competitors, because you're demonstrating that knowledge of what your particular segments that you're targeting, what they need. And then, of course, the third level, I think, more likely the ultimate level, is to understand the needs of specific accounts. What are their needs? What are their goals? And the companies that do more of this customized understanding about their customers, those are the ones who typically will do better in growing sales. So what should you know about your accounts? What should you know that helps you define that top part of the pyramid? It's things like, what's your client's potential for business, either measured in dollars or units? What kind of purchases are they currently making, and what do you think they're going to need in the future? Look to the internet and learn things about their financial and strategic goals and their mission, vision, and values, and see how well your company matches up with some of those things. And then probably some of the things that companies don't think about is to try to put themselves in their own client's shoes and say, well, what challenges and opportunities are they facing in their industry? How do they go to market? How do they compete? And who are their competitors? Can we help them be more successful in winning more business because of the products or services we offer? And probably some of you are shaking your head and saying, well, how am I going to get that kind of knowledge? Well, it's from a variety of different sources. You could go to the internet to get a lot of it. You can get some off their marketing materials or advertising. You can also have some discussions with their employees. Sometimes companies will encourage their employees to leave, or the employees may be unhappy at their job, and so they may come and talk to competitors about employment. So sometimes you can find out information that way. You can also have discussions with your other vendors who may also call on those companies, and then talk to the decision makers. The decision makers are going to give you the best information.
Well,
so that's
you were
really
actually, Sorry, Nancy, are you actually referring to actually call your customer and talk to them?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to have some examples later on, Chris. Yeah, very good.
Do you find, because I've found a lot of our clients, the companies that we work with, don't have a good handle on this, and they don't actually reach out to their client base. Are you seeing the same thing with the clients you're working with?
Yeah, some of them don't, and the ones that are doing best are the ones, of course, that do get out and ask those kinds of questions and get a better understanding of why they're buying from, your company, what their particular needs are, all those kinds of things. So it's really critically important. And I'm going to actually share an a customer survey in a few minutes.
Okay, great.
But now I wanted to talk a little bit about understanding your own competitive advantages from the customer's point of view. So if we could go to that slide, Chris, that would be great. Method of competition came from some research that was done by Michael Tracy and Fred Wertheimer in their book, Discipline of Market Leaders. Some of you may be familiar with the terminology. And the notion that they came up with was you need to be great at one of these three things, and you need to be good at the other two. So these are the three ways that companies or organizations compete. It's customer intimacy, and by the way, I'm not just talking about good customer service. I'm really talking about understanding your customer at a much deeper level, similar to that previous slide where you're understanding what motivates them and how they're going to market and all those kinds of things. It's providing those unique and tailored products and services that meet the specific needs of the segment or the individual client. Another way of competing would be product and service leadership, and this would be where you continuously introduce innovative designs and services. Your goal here is if somebody's going to obsolete your products or services, it's going to be you. So you want to be constantly in that. And there are companies that do, particularly well at that. Intel is an example. They're constantly looking at new ways to do things. And then the third way of competing is operational excellence. And this is where you, are the price and convenience leader. And I think probably many of us have seen the importance of this during the recession because more and more of your customers are looking for the lowest price. And so you've probably needed to focus a little bit more on this. But this is the strategic approach to the production and delivery of your products and services. And so you're always looking for ways to reduce efficiencies or lower your prices, that kind of thing. So these are the three ways that companies compete. You want to be great at least one of these, and then you want to be good at the other two. So you should be asking yourself.
Oops, sorry again, Nancy.
Yeah, I was going to say you should be thinking right now about, well, what does this mean for our company? We great at, and what are we good at, and are there some things that we're not even good at, and we better, put some attention to improving. What were you going to say?
This ends up being one of our, tools we talked about earlier that we've borrowed from, and it really helps our clients, identify how they're going to compete, what's their competitive advantage. Quite often we explain these three options to the leadership team, and I go around the room and I say, okay, head of marketing, tell me what you think, is what you have to be great at, and then head of operations and sales and whatever. And I may get through 3 or 4 people, and I've got 3 or 4 different answers. Right? And without that focus, then they can't really be on the same page. So for those listening today, the Michael Tracy article we have, you can get it on the hbr.com, but that's something we'd really push to start with to understand, what's your competitive advantage here, and how does your team agree on how that is going to play out for your business?
Absolutely. And, a lot of times the president or CEO will think, well, everybody's going to agree it's this, whichever one of the three it is. And, boy, are they surprised.
Usually.
They get different results. Exactly. Okay. So another thing you want to know is, why are your clients buying? And this is just a kind of a customer priority matrix where you see what the priority is in terms of what's important to the customer, service offerings, and is this particular answer. And then we ask them to rate the importance on a scale, okay, and out of 100. And so you can see service offerings is not only the #1 priority, but it's really, really important to the potential customers or customers that's, 35 out of 100. And then on the third column, we ask the company to say, well, how do you think you're doing? How is this company performing on service offerings, product quality, relationship price, et cetera. And sometimes there are some real mismatches between what the priorities are and what the scores are. So important thing for companies to find out. And our next slide is the sample customer survey that I promised that I would talk a little bit about. This will give you, just a starting point for having a conversation with your clients. I would recommend, Chris, if you'd go to the next slide. There you go. Thank you. That, you identify, the top, I don't know, could be 10, it could be 25 clients, and have a conversation with them. I would not recommend an internet survey. I would not recommend a mail survey. I would recommend either phone if you've got a lot of geographic dispersion and you can't meet face-to-face, or best ever would be to meet face-to-face with customers and ask them some of these questions. What are the top 3 reasons that you do business with our company? How do you rank us on these characteristics? Or, who is the top performing supplier and why? And pick and choose those questions that you can modify and make more effective for your particular situation, but you'll get a lot better understanding. And I think if you really understand your customers, it's going to be an important first step in generating more sales. So now how about if we focus on the competition? This is a tool we use in strategic planning, and it's the competitive strategy assessment. What we suggest you do is to pick, maybe your top 5 competitors. And that doesn't necessarily mean the largest companies that you compete with, but these are the ones that you might lose business to more often than not, or ones where maybe there's something going on. Maybe you're seeing some signs of weaknesses like layoffs occurring, or maybe they're selling their building, or whatever the case may be, something that would indicate some retrenchment that would tell you that, hey, these guys might be vulnerable. Let's study them and find out how we may be able to go after them. So the first thing you want to do is estimate their revenue. Now, sometimes you can know that information from news stories or trade magazine lists or that kind of thing. Sometimes you can get an indication from an internet, posting. Another way, if you can't get any information from the normal sources like the D&Bs or whatever, is you might want to try to estimate the number of employees they have. And then you multiply that times the average sales per employee in your company, okay? It's not going to tell you exactly what their sales are, but you're going to ballpark. So you'll know whether they're smaller than you, they're relatively the same size as you, or they're substantially bigger. And I'll tell you, I have even gone over to a competitor's firm and counted cars in the parking lot as a means of finding out how many employees they have. The next thing you want to know is who are the owners, and then what's important to them. Is this a family-owned company? Are there a lot of family members that need to be supported by the business? Because that can tell you what's going to be driving their decision-making. Market focus is next, and where what markets do they focus on? Have they maybe left some niches uncovered that you could go after? Are they good in each market segment, or is there an area where they're kind of weak and you can maybe even take a piece of their business? What are their competitive advantages? Check the internet, their marketing materials. Even ask their customers, particularly if you're competing with them. You may know some of those same people, or talk to the suppliers who call on them and find out what it is that seems to be driving their strategy. And then try to come up with, what is that strategy? Is it price? Is it quality? Is it being the first in the door, getting to new business faster, whatever? And then lastly, how do they sell? Are they selling strictly on the internet? Are they selling through outside sales Salesforce, through inside Salesforce, a combination of all of those things. Look at what they're strong at, and then look at where they're weak and go after those weaknesses. So once you know your customers and your competitive advantage, then what you want to do is target your best opportunities. And this is a tool that we've used for a long time with our clients. It's called Ansoff's Matrix, and it focuses in on the 4 ways that companies grow. And each box, starting with box number 1, left-hand corner, is called market penetration. This is where you sell more of your existing products and services to your existing customers. Very low-risk strategy. And then the second box is market development, where you're selling your existing products and services. But in this case, you're going after some new market niches or some new customers. There's moderate risk involved because they are new customers or new markets, but it still is not a super risky strategy. The third choice would be product development, and here's where you introduce new products or services to your existing customers, so you're getting more of their share of wallet. And again, that is a moderate risk strategy because you've got a relationship with the clients. You're just trying some new stuff with them to see if they'll be interested. And then the fourth box is diversification, and this, of course, is the riskiest because in this case, you're bringing no customers, you're bringing no products and services to the mix. This is the kind of strategy that you need to undertake if your back is to the wall. Generally speaking, I do not encourage small to mid-sized companies to go after that. But if your back is to the wall, then you need to think about diversification. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that that lower the risk, and that is to get a strategic partner to work with you or to make an acquisition. Find that other company who's bringing strength either to the market or the products or ideally both, okay? And yeah, thanks, Fritz. Here's an example of how one company used this tool. There are a number of different applications for it. You can actually brainstorm around those 4 boxes to see what ideas you have and then pick the ones that you need. In this particular case, we have a client who has identified that their biggest opportunity is in the market penetration box. That's good because it's low risk, remember? And what they're planning to do is invest 50% of their sales resources to be directed toward market penetration. And then, of course, if you look over to market development, which is box number 2, they're anticipating an opportunity of about $300,000 there and having to use about 30% of their resources. And then last, product development, which is box number 3. That's about a $200,000 opportunity this year. But maybe next year those new products would grow even more, and that means devoting about 20% of their resources. Notice in this particular case, they had no resources focused on diversification.
They didn't need it.
They didn't need it. That's right. So
well,
let's go
I think the important thing here, Nancy, and there's another tool I'm just going to elaborate on to people listening, is when you talk about growth and outperforming competition, you know, it's kind of obvious, you know, well, I'm going to sell existing products to existing customers or new products. Everyone gets that. But then when I ask, you know, head of sales, the president, whoever, so what of your growth and outperforming competition, how much is going to come from quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4, they kind of look at me funny. So although this is a very simple concept, it's very rarely applied, but when they do apply it, it becomes great focus. We know we're going to, you know, focus our resources on market penetration, and that's how much money we think we're going to get. And I think, Nancy, the next slide you're going to show where we can start identifying where that money's going to come from.
Exactly. That's the we're going to zero in on market penetration just for a minute on the next slide. So here what we're going to look at is how can you sell more existing products or services to existing customers? And this is just a sample of a spreadsheet. And actually, it's just a partial spreadsheet. It actually goes much further over to the right, but in the interest of having you be able to read it, we decided to cut off some columns here. But basically, what the strategic team would do, they would look at, well, who are the specific customers, and how big is the opportunity there? How much additional revenue do we think we can generate from this particular client? And that's in the opportunity dollar column. And then we also need to look at, well, what's their priority in terms of buying? Is it because they have a great relationship with us? Is it because our service levels are so much better? Is it because we can compete on price and they like our low prices? Those are all different kinds of decisions that clients make. And if you're really strong on relationships and your price is maybe not quite so good, you may need to think about, okay, how much resource do we want to put into going after a customer named Tora, as an example. The other next column over is the decision maker, okay, and that's critically important for the folks who are involved in sales to identify who gets to make the decision, not who says they're going to make the decision, but who really is going to make the decision. The owner column, of course, is the salesperson who's responsible for that particular account. And then you'll have a whole series that kind of runs off the page here of products or services and what kind of revenue. So in the case of the MC company, which is the one on the first line, it's a $225,000 opportunity, of which $135,000 will come from product or service number one, and a little over $56,000 would come out of product or service number two. And of course, those two don't add up to the 225, so there's some other columns there to the right. What this kind of an assessment does, though, is it helps them guide the sales team on where they should be devoting their efforts. And for a sales manager, it really helps them see their opportunities in one report so they can keep track of, not only where are the opportunities, how do we have to compete in it, and who do we need to be talking to. Okay, let's move to the next box, which is market development. And remember, this is selling existing products and services to new customers and markets. This is the kind of assessment that we use in strategic planning all the time to help our clients select those target markets that have potential. So in this client case, we've got a client who has a lot of their business, $4.4 million in manufacturing, with 46 different clients and an average client of over $95,000. So you might look down this list and say, well, look, there's 46 customers in that, and there's also 46 small businesses. So is that our number 2 market? But when you look at the market sales and you look at the average sales per customer, you realize that that may not be as attractive despite the number of customers that you have. So then you look at the next groups and you say, well, the market niche of government, that's almost $500,000 in sales. We only have 8 customers. We don't know from this example whether there are some obstacles to getting more customers that might be getting in our way. But it could very well be that the company has just started to sell to the government market, and there's a huge potential there, because notice the average sales per customer is over $60,000. So that's actually the second biggest in terms of average sales per customer assessment. And then the third one, of course, is healthcare, and here you've got really strong market sales. It's number 2, okay, overall, with 25 and an attractive 29,000 or more in average sales per customer. So you need to look at your market segments and look at it in this kind of detail so that you have a really good understanding of where the opportunities are to go after. The next box, box number 3, is product development. And when you're developing new products for existing customers and markets, you need to do some analysis. And this type of matrix shows you where the gaps are in your product and service and market matrix. Where is that potential for growth? Is there a box where, for example, the line extension would help you build the business? Or do you need something that's really new and innovative, a product or service to offer some specific market segments? And so what you would do is you would look at each market. Let's say market A is government as an example, and product one may be something, or service one may be something that brings in a lot of revenue, and maybe that product also sells to another market segment like manufacturing, but maybe it hasn't been selling to C and D. That may give you an opportunity to evaluate and expand how you're promoting that product, and maybe, as I said, you may need to develop a line extension there. I'm a little conscious of the time here, Chris, so let's go on and talk about the account strategy. This is what you do before you go out on the sales call, okay? You should have done all the research about your client. You need to know who you're going to contact, and hopefully it's going to be either the decision maker or somebody who can introduce you to the decision maker, because they have that kind of impact within the organization. You want to try to identify what their potential need is, and so you use what you know about the account. You strategize, how it is you're going to try to penetrate this account, and then you select your sales team, okay? It doesn't have to just be you. Is there somebody in your organization who has experience with this kind of company or in this kind of an industry? Do you have somebody who maybe would be able to do a demonstration, that could show the client how this would work in a particular application? Then you want to define the roles and responsibilities of the sales team. Everybody should have a role to play. If they don't have a role, they shouldn't be on the sales call. Okay? And then you want to set a specific agenda, identify the key questions you're going to go after, and identify the potential next steps. I think we wanted to do a survey next. Chris, do we have time for that?
We do, and what I'm going to do is launch this. Nancy did a great job going through some insights on revenue generation. I'd caution people listening to not just scroll over that and saying, yeah, that's simple, that's basic, I get it, because more often than not, most companies are not performing these techniques, and even going through here this sales call plan, and therefore they cannot outperform their competition because the competition is doing the same thing. We just kind of wing it. Mm-hmm. So here's a question I'd like you to fill out, and the question asks, what's the top sales technique weakness that you have? Nancy talked about three things in particular: not knowing your customers well enough, not understanding your competitive advantage, not targeting your best growth opportunities. And then we've given you the choice of saying all of the above or none of the above. Mm-hmm. So quickly you choose one of those, and then like about 10, 15 seconds, we'll share that with everyone can see where the challenges are. Then we're going to pass it off to Joe. Joe's going to talk about once you've got all this revenue coming in that Nancy's helped you with, how to make it profitable revenue. We've got almost 3/4 have completed this so far, and so far no one has none of the above. I'll share that with you. This is kind of like the news. The news says, and you'll hear about in 30 seconds, and you just got to hang on. Okay, we've got just about everybody voting. I'm going to do like 10 seconds here, and then we're going to close it, and I'm going to share it with you. And Nancy, what I'm going to ask you to do is, when you take a look at it, react to it. What's your thoughts? Okay. Sure. So let me close this and share it with everybody. And if you see that now, you can take a look and give me your reaction here.
Well, that's really interesting. I didn't expect not targeting my best growth opportunities to be the biggest challenge that people have, because I thought that people would feel as though their sales process, really, which is what we were talking about there, is pretty efficient. So this is saying that there's some work to be done there. And then, of course, other people chose all of the above. That was tied with not knowing my customer well enough. And I think too often people kind of pay lip service to their customers. They go, oh, yeah, we know them. We've been doing business with them for 20 years and everything. But meanwhile, there have been changes in the organization and, maybe in the hierarchy of the, family structure or whatever the case may be. And they just haven't really zeroed in on finding out all about the customer. So very interesting response.
I think your chart that you had, the big spreadsheet 2 slides ago that showed and their total opportunity and what services or products. I know I've used with my clients, and they've got some great insights because it helps them target where's the best opportunities without assuming where it might be.
Exactly. Great. Yeah, I think
All right, so I'm going to,
Chris.
that's a great tool. This is great. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to pass you now on to Joe, who's going to talk about the profit improvements. Joe?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much, and good job, Nancy. We have process improvement, and right now I think any company, if you're not doing it, you're behind the competition. We're talking today about how to stay ahead of the competition. Unless you have no competition, which we all love to have that position, but it doesn't happen, it's very, very rare, you need to do process improvement. And many companies or many people consider lean, which is a manufacturing term. They think it applies actually only to manufacturing or services execution only. Process improvement really covers all steps of what you do, from the sales quotation cycle right on through the shipping cycle. And it covers every part of the company. In finance, it would be the payables, how you do your payables, okay? How you do your estimating, every part of your company. And what it essentially does is process improvement. We all like to think we could have a better mousetrap. That's a way to make us better. But in reality, that doesn't happen as often as we like. But there's always opportunity to eliminate waste and non-value-added steps. One of the biggest obstacles come into is when the people that are there to execute the work say, hey, we tried that, it didn't work, and they don't want to go forward. Well, ask the question, why didn't it work? Is there something we can do differently, modify it? But that's usually a big stumbling block people throw out is we tried it, didn't work. The other one is, and you tend to see this at the higher level, our business, well, that's a fallacy. I had occasion to work briefly with a wire company where they had a 10% internal reject rate, okay? And after 2 years, it worked with a group on improvement. And my first comment was, so you picked the wrong group. No, they just don't know our business. Well, guess what? 1% of internal reject rate is worth $100,000. So 10% was costing them $1 million a year. The issue was the ownership did not want to do what needed to be done to make it happen. It's not that it couldn't be. So, because they said, quote, their business is unique. That's not the case. Any company that the benefits you're going to get from process improvement, they come into 3 main categories. You'll reduce the elapsed time to do the work and deliver your products and services faster, and you become more competitive. It's an advantage. You get a higher throughput, okay, so you can have your organization, which basically lowers all your average overhead rates, improves your margins, okay? There's a cement products company I work with. They were ready to make a major investment to capital equipment to be able to increase production capacity. After flow charting their processes and taking a look at if you did every step without interruption, it was determined you could do 2 times the capacity. Well, yes, they were able to do that, and the way they do it is basically take certain steps offline, eliminate certain delays, and they had easily 2 times the capacity. Increase your throughput. Everybody can. And then finally, the higher productivity you're going to get because you need less labor. It's going to translates into higher, lower cost. There's other benefits of process improvement, and most companies, none of us want to deal. Next slide, Chris. None of us want to deal with the tough waters. It's much, much easier to work getting good at routine stuff and executing it, and our life is real easy. But we really avoid the tough waters because, let's face it, they disrupt all the other work we're doing. We use our best people, usually over budget. Somebody's heads on the chopping block for that, and then because you couldn't, the customer says you didn't do what you say you're going to do, it's irate. So they're usually, no one wants to do that. However, it can be, in fact, an opportunity. If you put process improvement in place, and you take what are those tough orders and you learn how to do them efficiently, all of a sudden they become a big moneymaker. I worked with a capital equipment company on what I would call the standard products, which were in a very, very competitive market. They averaged 9%. It grew 9% at one point in time. We moved toward a very high mix of what we call specials and large tanks, which everyone said, hey, all it's going to do is disrupt the shop. By learning how to do that and do it in an efficient manner, we could sell it. That became the majority of our sales, which then generated between 35 and 40% gross margin. So take a look at what you find to be difficult today and say, if we learn to do that well, could we in fact get a premium in price? And do that, the customers then, you learn how to do something that take 3 months, a week and a half. Guess what? That's what the customers now start to put in their schedules, and you're then maybe the only one that can meet that schedule. Process improvement also should reach outside of your organization, because if you have to rely on suppliers and subcontractors to do that, they've got to be on board with you. So you've got to develop relationships with them, and they have to be able to basically embrace process improvement on their own. You may be required, you should be looking at terms agreements with them, and instead of beating them up, it becomes more of a partnership. So in some instances, you're able to, on the case of, I tell you, work with a large process equipment manufacturer, we set agreements up with the steel mills, okay, where we could buy 160,000 pounds of heat of material, but instead of taking that whole heat at once, they would inventory it. So it's a partially completed product, and they store it in name form. And what we would then do is release against it, and they would roll it to the size we need. Well, lead time then went from 16 weeks down to 8 weeks, okay? But not only that, we did not have to carry that inventory, all that effort. So there's ways to work with suppliers. In order for you to succeed in process improvement, you've got to be working with suppliers that are willing to do the same. And just some final notes on process improvement. So why do the best performing organizations always say we have a long way to go on process improvement? And you always scratch your head and say, how much could be left? You look at all the great things you've done. The point is you have to keep doing it. There's always opportunity ahead. And as a company, if you want to know, how do you start? Well, internally, you can do a flow chart every area, whether it be payables, estimating, production, whatever. And before we close, we're going to show you a flow chart. But that's one way to get started. And when you look at those charts, you look and say, how can we eliminate steps that are not needed, which is really waste? If you an external resource, a catalyst would help start the process. And I know there's a lot of agencies and funding sources that could actually subsidize the cost of bringing someone in to help you. If anybody, I don't right now have a list, but if anyone would like me to share with them a list, just feel free to give me a call. I personally have done a lot of work with NETAC, an organization that funds manufacturing companies in New England who've been hurt by foreign competition. And certainly process improvement is one of the areas where probably 9 out of 10 times that's one of these areas that's funded. And then the final page here is this is a typical process map, okay? This happens to be from the area. But you can develop a process flow chart for just about it may be more challenging to find a better way to do things, the better mousetrap. But I tell you, there's always an opportunity to eliminate non-value-added steps and waste. And thank you, Chris. If you want to wrap up.
Thanks, Joe. Went through a little quick because we're getting a little low on time, but I think what we're trying to convey here in particular is it's not cost reduction, not about cutting costs, as it is about process improvement, which is talking about efficiency and throughput, as Joe said earlier. And if you can obviously put more product almost through your business, same resources, you become more efficient. It actually lowers your cost. One of the things we'd be interested to know, and again might be good for everyone here, is to find out how effective do you think your organization is, and how much more effective can it be. So this is our last poll or survey, and it's asking the question, how much more effective do you think that your business or process can be, either working on them or even an expert? And the range goes 5% to over 50%. So let's, everyone would please just pick one to see how much better they think of their processes. And again, we're talking about both what I call front office processes, the administrative or in product development or order entry processes, to the back end of the manufacturing distribution processes of the business. So take a quick poll on that, please. Please check that, Joe, and I'm gonna show it to you, and you can give us some feedback. And we've got a bunch of questions that we're not going to be able to get to today, only because of the time, but I will answer those individually after. So let's take like another 5 seconds here, and let's see what we have. How more effective do you think your process can be? And I'm going to close this here in a second, and then Joe, I'm going to show it to you. And so far, the good news is, well, I don't say good news, but no one thinks it's 5%. It's over 5%. So the answer here, I'm going to share it with everybody. Joe, take a look and give me a reaction on that.
Well, I'm surprised at the 10. I think the 10% is really low, and you're probably going to find, I think it's going to come out over 30. If you took a bell curve of companies, you're going to find that the median's going to probably be up around 30. So what it's saying to me is I think most folks, until they sit with someone, go over, take a look at what their operations are doing, and recognize potential, you're probably going to pick the 10%. But I think once you sit a few hours, have somebody talk with you, take a look at what might, I think that number would go up to over 30.
Well, that's the question, right? How much is out there? I think everyone's saying, or most people are saying at least 10%. Some are saying over 50%. But the whole point here is, if you're going to outperform your competition, you have to be more efficient than they are. And so maybe you think there's 10%. I'm going to go back to my push on culture and organizational change and dynamics and say we got to stretch for 20% or 25%. I think the whole point here is, though, we got to step up, what we're trying to do if we're really going to outperform the competition. Let's what I'm going to do now is summarize what we have today. I do have some questions, but we're a little tight on time, and so I want to keep everything on time. The point we're trying to make today is that if you're going to outperform your competition, you've got 3 things you got to focus on. You got to focus on generating revenues, becoming more effective in the sales generating system. Okay, Nancy talked about knowing your customers, understanding what your competitive advantages are, and targeting your best growth opportunities. If I remember correctly, the knowing your customer and targeting your growth opportunities were some of the 2 challenges where most of the people listening in today could have some improvements. We talked about operational improvements, the profit improvement, focusing more on process efficiencies, not just cost reduction. Joe talked about a culture of continuous improvement and how to improve the processes within your business, starting with something basic like the flow charting. I started off by talking about the cultural dynamics of what you need to do to just basically, challenge yourself, challenge your organization to become more competitive. We found that companies that implement these 7 keys are much more effective than those that are not implementing them. As you think about that race between the rabbit and the tortoise, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's a race. Who is going to be better? You're competing not against the industry and the world as a whole. You're competing against competitors directly in your backyard. And what is it that you're offering that's better than them? Especially when you get into commodity products that you can buy anywhere. It's just a matter of where do you want to buy them based on service or offer. So we talk a lot about it's not what you know you need to do, it's what you do about it. So I'd encourage you to take some action today and to go and improve your business. Now, we did infer a little about experts on the outside, so I'm going to give you our little sales pitch here, which is we have some diagnostic tools that might be able to help you identify. We're talking, Joe, a little about the 10% process improvement. Maybe there's more. We've got a diagnostic, we call it our strategic growth analysis, where we help organizations figure out where is the bigger opportunities by looking at a combination of these 7 keys and also providing a financial benchmark on their organization. It takes 2 to 3, maybe 4 days of time. We basically get this done in a whole week. It's actually very cost effective. It's something that doesn't cost more than maybe a couple or more dollars. And what we provide to you is the insights on where are your gaps, where can you get better, and what do you need to do. We actually give you recommendations. So I'll just leave that with you as a thought, and there's actually a quote there from one of our past clients, was, the strategic growth analysis was a real eye-opener. I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's kind of what we're trying to share with you today, is what do you need to do to become more competitive and to beat your competition. So I will end with, here's our contact information. Please feel free to call us with any additional questions. We'll try to get answers to the questions that were sent to us earlier out. I will send the presentation out maybe later on today, maybe tomorrow, so you have a copy of that. If you have any additional questions, want to know about how we might be able to help you outperform competitors, please give us a call. Nancy, Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, and thanks to everybody for attending.
Thank you all.
Everyone have a great day. We're ending. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.